My superpower as a teacher has always been my ability to create a nurturing environment for my students where they can express themselves fully and also start to believe in themselves again. So, my proposal for South by Southwest is entitled Expressing Our Multitudes Within, creating a space for authentic student voice. And the way that I propose to do this is by facilitating a workshop. I want to start with some guiding questions for my other educators for them to really start the metacognitive process and reflect on their own praxis and what may or may not be getting in the way of student voice in their classroom. And then I kind of want to move from there into a deep discussion where I share some of the practices that have worked for me in developing this space. It does not come easily, it does not come right away. Part of it, of course, is a daily journal practice where students have a choice of 3 different questions. And the third choice for them always is to express whatever's on their mind. And they just write for those 10 minutes the entire time tangibly, because a lot of research has shown that when we write tangibly, we write physically into a notebook, it actually helps us develop our schemas. The second thing I wanted to point out is that in order for a student to really express themselves, whether it's through writing or through their voice, through collaborative discussion, through art or any other medium, they need to trust you first. And those students who live in the margins, whether it is socioeconomic, cultural, religious, racial, all of these different things in which stories have been created for them, a single story has been created for them, that impacts their self-efficacy and their self-esteem. So you kind of have to start it off slow, whether you're working with students who are at a lower grade level, like 5th, 6th grade. I've used these techniques from students as young as 12 all the way up to my adult students in my ESL community classroom. So like the first and foremost is you developing a safe space for those students. And that starts through classroom principles and through collective compacts and guidelines. So the first step of that is for the students to just understand the routines in your classroom, that there will be discussions bi-weekly, and that you yourself have to model mistakes in the process. You have to kind of step away from this one-size-fits-all approach of standardization, because that is one of the main things that we're up against as educators that's impeding critical thinking, is this idea that there is one right answer. Students use artificial intelligence or look up answers on the internet in an English classroom not because they don't have their own ideas, but because they have been taught and they have been treated as though their ideas are somehow wrong. It has been a huge transition from when I was in school. You know, I graduated in 2007 from high school. I graduated college in 2011. I was a first generation college student. I know how daunting it can feel to be in environments that are unfamiliar to you. So you as a teacher, and this is what the whole workshop is about, is kind of modeling this approach, going through resources, because not only is it that you have to get them to feel safe enough to open up through their writing, but you also have to get them to a point where they feel confident enough in their own approach and their own thinking to share that with the people around them. And you kind of build from there. It's not something that happens immediately. It's kind of a multi-tier process where you start with the introspection. We do a daily journal practice. Another thing that I've done that I think helps this metacognition on their part is to do like the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, different inventories, like are they a visual learner, are they kinesthetic, are they all these things, and then also to have daily routines. So it's like the journal practices, and then you have weekly discussions. The first time that the discussion happens, that's when it's going to be really challenging because they're not used to having a space to express themselves. So you have to model that for them. You have to tell them, like, specifically, like, what is the purpose of this discussion? Is it for you to say the right answer about the text, which most of them, that has been their experience with collaborative discussions? Or is it an opportunity for them to build and to learn together? So in my experience, that first discussion, because I prefer to have it student-led and I want them to generate both the questions and the discussions and to talk to each other, it's like I'm a fly on the wall. You have to sit through the silence. You have to also normalize silence and process. We live in a culture where immediacy seems to be like this urgency is what is most important, most valued. But in order for a student to really find their voice and to express that voice, whether it's through artistic mediums, whether it's them refining their writing practices, all of these different ways, they need to have the time to actually figure out what they do think. So I think that that's another incredibly important aspect of facilitating this discussion, facilitating this expression for students. Another thing that I do in the beginning of the year is that I provide classroom principals and I have them come up with their own guidelines for classroom discourse, classroom routines, and even for me as the teacher, so that they understand that I'm not like just the boss in the classroom. That yes, I am the guide and I will be there and I will hold people accountable and I will hold myself accountable. But that I also am not just going around judging them all the time, because if they feel like they're being judged, especially if they come from any sort of marginalized background, they will clam up and they won't express themselves. So like this is my idea for this. I also will include in this discussion some of the text that I've used, because the other thing is you can't expect them to be able to create something if you do not provide opportunities of modeling that. So this is embedded and integrated throughout my writing process, whether we're doing a creative expression or whether we're doing more formal analysis. I will model for them, like whether it's on the blackboard or whether it's like me typing on the computer, I will model how I would answer the question. And then you can differentiate from there, and then they can play with it, they can refine it. I also like to have workshops in the classroom, so where students are reading and revising one another's work, which is super important for building self-efficacy and discernment of their own skill sets. But yeah, that is my proposal. I do have plenty of resources and ways in which I have done this in the past. The most important thing, I think, for fostering this authentic expression is providing multiple modalities for students to show that they understand things. So an example of this from my previous teaching experience, something that I can model also in the workshop, is that I have had Yo Soy, like that play, like it's a Chicano text. It's Yo Soy Joaquin. And they have like this older media presentation of that. And I've allowed students to demonstrate their learning through like drawing, through artistic expression, through like pulling symbols and archetypes. I just provide a lot of different opportunities for students to be able to express themselves. And then of course like the weekly discussions where they are not only evaluated according to like speaking, but for those who are more introverted, they have the opportunity to express through reflective practices. And then, of course, presence. Presence is key to all of this. You, as the educator, must be present, and you must also foster an environment of presence and of acceptance. That means that if anything happens that is harmful to the students for any reason, whether it's like joking or not, you must hold those students accountable, whether that is a side conversation, whether that is pulling the kid outside, and also just giving them a plethora of different types of text to look at, like Stella Pop Duarte. You have Gloria Anzaldúa, who wrote Borderlands and How to Tame a Wild Tongue. That's an incredible text for students who are native Spanish speakers who are still learning English. And then you have The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action by Audre Lorde. And so just like making sure that you have spaces for students to see authentic writing and authentic expression, authentic arts, and that they have multiple ways in which to express around it. But yeah, it's a slow process, and it's really about creating that culture. And so that's my proposal.